Therese Huston, thank you so much for coming on the Sexy Aging podcast. And it's been a while since I've done a podcast interview. I know if anyone's listening, they'll be like, okay, where's Tracy been? But it's an important reason that I wanted to have this interview because I have been down a little bit of a rabbit hole around brain health and aging. And I personally know that as I went through perimenopause, brain fog, anxiety, forgetfulness, forgetting people's names, it actually had me shook how bad that symptom was. And now that I've come through perimenopause, I'm technically postmenopausal, I feel like things have got better, but I actually just want to understand it a whole lot more. You are an expert in brain health and brain science, but it's better if I let you tell us about yourself and how you got into this field. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tracy. What an honor to be one of your first guests when you're returning to the studio for these kinds of fabulous interviews. I just feel so honored. Thank you for inviting me on. So I am a cognitive neuroscientist in the United States, as people can no doubt tell from my accent. And I have a PhD in what's known as cognitive psychology. And for years, I just did research, and now I want to help people. And I don't just want to help people who have impairments, but I want to help everyday people like you and me who, like you said, are frustrated by like the changes that we're seeing either in our abilities, something that we used to come easily isn't as easy as it used to be. And it's kind of funny, Tracy. So I've done a fair number of interviews about aging and the brain and the mind. And what's fascinating is about 2/3 of them have been with women hosts for the podcast because we often want to talk about midlife and menopause. And about 1/3 have been men. And I will tell you, Tracy, the men never lead with, I'm noticing changes in how I'm thinking, right? Which is really fascinating because the data is clear that men are also losing decision-making abilities, memory abilities, and in fact, it often starts sooner for men than it does for women, which is fascinating. But whereas women are talking about it, men aren't talking about it. Maybe because women know that part of it's attributable to perimenopause and men don't have a reason. So they're just nervous about losing their abilities. But it's really fascinating to me that men rarely start there, and they might admit it pretty far into the interview, but often many of them don't. So good for you to provide this open opportunity for women to understand themselves better, as well as to understand that they're not alone.
Yeah, hey, thank you. You've just got me thinking now about the whole men don't realize that this is happening for them too. So let's do like an umbrella question that kind of provides an answer for both sexes. So what causes memory loss?
Number of things. So if we're talking across men and women, a number of things. There are really 4 major changes that happen to both men and women. The first one is that we start losing something called white matter in the brain. So white matter, it's white. It literally is white because it's fatty tissue on the neurons. And basically it's like providing grease. That fatty tissue makes neurons fire faster or signals move faster. And we start losing some of that. And that's one of the reasons you might be slower to come up with someone's name.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. You see
I
them
know about that.
yes, you see them at the grocery store and you're used to seeing them at work. And for just a hot second, you're like, wait, what's your name again? And it's embarrassing. And a big part of that has nothing to do with menopause, perimenopause. That's just losing a little bit of white matter. And that starts happening around age 40. We kind of peak at age 40 and then it comes down from there. So that's one cause for both men and women. A second is every decade after age 40, we lose 5% of our prefrontal cortex, which is right here behind your forehead. I have a bandage on my hand. I'm okay, but I'll use my other hand. You start losing about 5% of your prefrontal cortex every decade after age 40, men and women. And this is going to affect memory. It's going to affect decision making. It's going to affect impulse control. So if you find yourself going from 0 to 60 with irritation, that's prefrontal cortex not functioning as well as it could be. In terms of like, you get someone knocks on your door and interrupts you and you get irritable really fast, right? That's your prefrontal cortex not serving you as well as it used to. So you start losing that. You start losing the third area. So you start losing is your hippocampus, again, about 5% every decade after age 40. And that's crucial for forming new memories as well as retrieving old memories. So that can be one of the reasons that people say, like, I walk into the garage and I can't remember why I'm here.
Yeah.
That's normal.
Yep.
That's the hippocampus. It's just it's basically like your librarian having trouble finding the right book on the shelves. And then the fourth thing that happens is we begin to have a diminishment of certain transmitters, especially dopamine, and that hits women harder than men because losing estrogen in perimenopause and menopause especially affects dopamine. But men have a drop in dopamine as well. And so you just might not feel as motivated. Dopamine makes you want to do things. And so you might be finding that I have a good to-do list and I don't want to do it. And that's in part dopamine. So those would be the four big
Yeah.
changes that happen to men and
Oh,
women.
wow. I mean, you've just got my brain is firing up right now with everything that you've just said, and I can think of multiple situations, and I'm sure many of the listeners can as well. They're like, okay, so the first question I have, the prefrontal cortex. So
Yes.
I have a teenager, and I have a daughter going into her 20s, and we often talk about the prefrontal cortex. I think there's an awareness now about people not being able to make good decisions and having
Yes.
no impulse control at up to a certain age. Interesting that you say that we lose that again later in life. Is there a relationship between, say, perimenopause and that accelerating? Because we do often associate a perimenopause symptom of rage, low mood, low motivation. And then my next part to the question is, do you kind of recover your prefrontal cortex? And I know this is not on the script of questions, but that's where my brain has gone.
Absolutely.
It's like, I know personally I had all of those things that you spoke about, and I'd walk into a room, not know why I was there, couldn't introduce a friend to another friend, and I'd known them for years. But now I can't say that. I can't say that that's the case, even though it's been a decade.
Mm-hmm. Are you saying Are you saying that
Can you get better?
You can definitely get better. I love the tagline for your podcast about it's not all downhill after 40, right? You're trying to disabuse people of that myth, and that's definitely true. So a couple of different things. So first of all, in terms of prefrontal cortex decline, in terms of losing the connectivity there and losing gray matter, it peaks at age 40 and begins to decline unless you take steps to hold on to it. And there are wonderful things we can talk about. There are things you can do. But if you don't do those extra things, then there's a good chance you're going to be losing connectivity and you're going to lose gray matter there in your prefrontal cortex. So we can get into strategy. So the good news is it is preventable. It is something that you can even reverse. You can, if you've lost some connectivity in your prefrontal cortex, you can gain it back. So you picture it like a tree that's lost some branches. You can actually grow new branches. It's not a matter of always losing more and more branches to the tree. So that's the really good news. So if you're listening to this at 50 and you've already had some decline in your prefrontal cortex, you can gain it back. So that's great news.
Love that. I'm
Yes.
actually going to use this as the post to share because I think people really want to hear that level of hope that, oh, it's not always like this. It could be better, or I could return to full function if I do a certain number of things to take.
Yes.
If it's important enough to me, I will do whatever it takes, right?
Absolutely. Well, and it's led to, I can tell you about some of the changes I've made in my own life as a result of researching this book. But the other good news for women in perimenopause, the good news is there's research in the United States. I haven't seen research in Australia or New Zealand, but research in the United States, there was this huge national study called the SWAN study of women's health across the nation. Over 3,000 women. It was a longitudinal study. It sounds like you know about it. What they found was that about 60% of women experience, for example, brain fog. And this longitudinal study was of women during midlife. So they were really looking at women during perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. And what they found was that about 60% of women experience brain fog. So that was higher than I would have expected. I would have thought it was 40, 50% because not all of my friends complain about it. But about 60% of women report it. The great news is that within 2 to 3 years after their last period, postmenopause, about 80% of women find that their mental clarity, their ability to recall things has gone back to their pre-perimenopause levels. 80% of us are going to get it all back, right? At least,
amazing.
Until it's fabulous, right? And then for the 20% that don't get it back, there's one of three reasons. One, depression gets in the way. Number two, poor sleep. So if you have insomnia, that's going to make it hard to get your abilities back. And the third one is if you have a genetic predisposition towards dementia. So if there's early dementia in your family, then it's less likely that the mental fog will go away. But for most of us, thank goodness, it's like you said, it's something that you're just like, phew, it's in the rear view mirror.
Yeah, well, I'm, for want of a better word, completely mind blown right now.
Good.
I just feel an incredible amount of hope and excitement,
Mm.
and I know lots of people listening will feel the same way, because this is actually a really big discussion for me and some of my girlfriends. It's just the amount of things that we've forgotten to do in the past, or that low motivation feeling, and we know that that's not who we are as people. And just in the last year, for me personally, I feel that my brain function has definitely come back, and I'm not sure that it's at 100% that it was prior to perimenopause, but it almost feels like, and you use the analogy of the tree. I used that in an interview just last week,
Nice.
how it felt like the perimenopause was the pruning of the tree.
Yes.
And then you had to wait it out until you grew some new branches, which takes time. And then with the new branches came like real abundant fruit. And that's what it feels like now, which is I've got this tree full of fruit, and it's good fruit. It's not bad fruit. It's good fruit. It's all the good stuff that I want to
Yes.
keep in my life. The bad stuff is long gone. And when you said about the hippocampus forgetting things, I'm kind of glad that I've forgotten lots of bad memories. That's okay. But then I have also noticed, sometimes I have to think twice about, did that actually happen? And I'm talking about trying to recall things when I was a child. Or, for example, last week I took a menopause workshop in the city that I grew up in. I went back for that, and there were a lot of people there that I went to school with, high school, and some of them came up and said, "Hi, do you remember me?" And I didn't remember their names, but I remember their faces.
That's impressive.
And that was but that was a moment where I was like, oh, why can't I remember their name? If I had to say hi in their name, that would be embarrassing. And so that for me was a bit like, oh, bummer. I've actually forgotten some memories of an interaction that we might have had at school, or a sport that we might have played together. Like, I couldn't really recall some of that. Although when I saw their face, I'm like, I do know you. Yeah, so that's the only thing that I feel like, okay, maybe I'm not sure what to do about that, but that's why we're here, right? To talk about
Exactly. Well,
brain function and
so
memory.
yeah, I'm glad you bring up the example of names. So what's tricky about names, um, and this might not have to do with any loss of gray matter. If you think about memory, this isn't a perfect analogy, but if you think about your memories as a library, and when you knew them, these people, when you were 18 or 20, think about how many names you had in your library, right? And now, today, 20, 30 some years later, how many more names do you have in your library, right? So you can imagine why it's going to be much harder on the spot to pull the right volume with exactly the right name and all the memories that come with it, right? And what's interesting is when there are more cues, right? When you hear someone's voice, when they remind you of a particular memory, like if they said something, don't you remember that time when we went, I don't know, roller skating or something like that? Once you have enough other cues, you might find that the memory comes back. Or if they smell like they used to smell, right? There was a particular cologne that you associate with that person. Hopefully, their taste in colognes have changed since they were 18, but you never know. But the more cues there are, the easier it is to find that volume on the shelves. And so it doesn't necessarily reflect loss of gray matter. It could just reflect you've got a more crowded library now than you did before.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really love your analogies. I want to dive into something that's a little bit personal as well. So my mother-in-law has dementia. She's not that old. It's not great.
I'm so sorry.
And it has been my first experience with someone close to me in the family with something like that. So it is, I think, for any of us that have family members that are going through this, it is really confronting, right? And then you start thinking, okay, so what's happening to the brain that causes that? So what's the difference between normal age-related memory changes and serious cognitive decline? And so can we discuss sort of Alzheimer's and dementia here?
So why don't I give you 3 things that if these things are happening to you, you don't have to worry. So I'll tell you 3 things that are
good, thanks.
just normal. It's just a normal part of aging. And if you see these things happening to your memory, don't worry about them. Or your abilities, don't worry about them. And then I'm going to give you 3 things that if they're happening, you might want to talk about it with your GP. Okay.
Okay.
Let's start with the 3 things that are just a normal part of aging that we might start to see after age 40 for men or women. So if this is happening, you said it's your mother-in-law, so your husband, if you see these things in your husband, don't be panicked. So those 3 things would be, first of all, what we call in the United States, maybe you call it there too, tip of the tongue phenomenon, where you can't quite come up with a
Yeah.
word. And you're like, maybe with someone's name, you're like, oh, it starts with an S, but what was it? Right? That's just going to happen. And like we said, it's part of losing some white matter or some white matter connectivity. So you're slower. And later, like hours later, you'll be like, oh, it was Sarah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. You're just like, why now? When I'm taking a shower? This is not helpful.
Yeah.
So tip of the tongue phenomenon would be number 1. Number 2 would be, this is going to sound untechnical, but mild forgetfulness is what we would refer to it as. And that's where, like the example I gave, you walk into the garage and you can't remember what you were going to get there. Or you find yourself using Find My Phone more often, right? You're just like, where did I put my phone? I thought it was.
That's a really good point. I've actually never used that.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, good for you.
No. Yeah, I'm winning.
You are winning. You're winning.
Yeah, but that's a really good point.
Yeah. And the third one, or another example that people often relate to with their phone, you'll open up your phone to look at the weather and you get distracted by something else. And then you're like, wait, well, I never checked the weather. You're like, right?
Yeah, that's definitely me.
Right. And that will happen, like it will probably happen less to your son and your daughter than it does to you, right? Part of it's you get more distracted. Part of it is and that happens with age, we get more distracted by things. But also you just lose, so many things are going through your mind, you forget the one thing that you started out in picking up your phone to do. So mild forgetfulness, normal. Tip of the tongue phenomenon, normal. And the third one doesn't actually have to do with memory. It has to do with multitasking, and that is multitasking gets harder as we age. And a big part of that is because we're distracted more easily. So the way that I'm experiencing this, I love to cook for people, and I love to cook while guests are there, and we cook together, and we're talking while we're making dinner. And what I'm finding is I get a little more like, if someone's interrupting me while I'm cooking, I get a little more frustrated. And I'll be like, wait, no, I've got to focus on this. I'm sorry, I can't have that deep conversation with you while I prepare this complex dish. Whereas I think when I was younger, it was just like, yeah, fine. I could do both things, right? Or at least I felt like I could do both things.
That's a really good one. Yeah.
Multitasking
I agree with that. Yeah.
Multitasking gets harder. And that's true for men and women. So those would be the 3 things. Any of those things are happening to you. Lucky for you, you're not having the, Find My Phone phenomenon. But those of us who are having it, we're right.
1 out of 3.
1 out of 3. There you go. Enjoy it. Enjoy it while it lasts. And then the 3 that if any of these are happening to you, pay attention to, they happen more than once. And if they're happening on a regular basis, take it like your check engine light coming on and staying on. You want to talk about it with somebody. So the 3 to watch out for, one would be people tell you that you're repeating yourself, or you just can't come up with a word. And I don't mean someone's name. I mean, you can't come up with the word book, right? You like, what is that word? And it doesn't come to you later, and you find yourself not able to come up with words. That would, as well as maybe your spouse tells you you're repeating yourself, or a good friend says you're repeating yourself. That would be concern number 1, that something is awry. Concern number 2 would be you can't remember things that you've done many times before. And you find yourself needing to put reminders for things that you used to just do automatically. Like you forget that you have a book club, or you forget how to do a recipe you've made many times before. That would be a concerning thing. And the third one that would be a real concern would be you find yourself lost in familiar places. So you go to a shopping center, a mall that you've been to many times, and you walk in and you have no idea how to get to your favorite store. So those would be 3 things. If any of those things, if they happen once, not a big deal. But if they've happened a couple of times, then I'd recommend talking about it with your GP so that you could do some testing. Because although it might be scary if these things are happening on a somewhat regular basis, the good news is if it is a sign of early dementia or the early signs of dementia, there are things you can do to slow the progression, to kind of keep things where they are. I think that it's helpful to have that. My mom and I were just talking. She's 78, and she's worried about some of these normal signs of cognitive decline. And I was able to reassure her, like, you are doing so well, Mom. You're doing great.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. Hey, I have learned a lot from that.
Good, sure.
Yeah. you've got me really thinking about, what to look out for. And it's good to know. I think a lot of people will get a lot out of this, to be
Sure.
honest. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't aware that those are the sort of three things to look out for. So good to know.
Yeah. And it's,
I want to unpack. Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, my father-in-law also has dementia, and it's scary. And I wish he had so much pride that people weren't willing to act on his behalf early. And I think that's sad, because I think with medication we could have slowed his decline. And so if you do
Right.
have a loved one who's like my father-in-law, who has a lot of pride, you are going to help them so much if you can have the conversation with their GP, maybe offer to go with them to a doctor's appointment, so that, maybe they can't be honest about what's happening, but you could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
I want to backtrack a little bit
Sure.
about two topics that you've mentioned.
Okay, of course.
And I'm trying really hard to remember everything I want to ask you.
There's so much good stuff, I know.
So much good stuff, yeah. So the first one is, what can you tell us about what you know about brain fog and brain function during perimenopause? Like that relationship of hormone dysregulation and the impact on the brain. Because I think we need to know that it's not all in our head, which is another pun, but yeah.
It's definitely not just all in our heads. So there are a couple of things that increase brain fog, or that we researchers believe contribute to brain fog. And so if these things are happening to you right now, you'll know, like, oh, that might be the reason, that might be something that I can work on. So one current hypothesis is that the problem is something called glymphatic clearance, which is just a mouthful. But glymphatic clearance is one of the things that happens during sleep. So during deep sleep, which is often really disrupted by night sweats and the difficult aspects of sleep during perimenopause, perimenopause really disrupts that deep sleep. And one of the things that happens during deep sleep is we get a clearing out, a metabolic clearing out of waste products in our brain. And the way I like to think about it, as you've learned, I like analogies. So imagine at the end of a day in a really busy conference room, there's going to be some papers, there's going to be a bunch of like coffee cups in the trash, but there'll be some on the tables that people forgot to throw away. Some of the windows will be open and some will be closed, and the blinds will be, it's a mess, right? And if you had to come in the next day and no cleaning crew had come in, it would be hard to get to work efficiently, right? Because you'd have to move all this stuff aside before you could do your work. And one of the things that happens is glymphatic clearance is basically that cleaning crew coming, setting everything back up so that it's perfectly pristine for the work for the next day. So if your sleep is messed up, that glymphatic clearance isn't happening. And as a result, basically every day you're coming back to a more and more cluttered conference room. So no wonder it's hard to think as quickly, because you're having to clear stuff off the desk yourself. Nobody didn't do it for you. So glymphatic clearance is a big part of it. A second part is that because of the hormonal changes that are happening, we get a reduction in the hippocampus's ability to function as smoothly, because there are a lot of hormone receptors in the hippocampus. So once things settle down and your hippocampus is like, oh, this is our new baseline, then the hippocampus can adjust, right? It basically can compensate. But because some days your hormones are high and other days they're really low, basically the hippocampus can't adjust. And as a result, our memory abilities falter a little bit. And that's the second part of the brain fog. And the third part is believed to be that we get a reduction in certain neurotransmitters, dopamine and acetylcholine. And dopamine is helpful for motivation. Acetylcholine is hopeful for focus. Am I focused on this or not? So and those hormonal changes, estrogen going all over the place, affects acetylcholine, so you can't focus as well. So those are the three things that are thought to contribute to brain fog.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That explains a lot. Now, coming through perimenopause, can you grow those receptors back, or do they kind of reboot? Like you've mentioned that obviously the dysregulation of estrogen will mean that the hippocampus doesn't know what the heck's going on.
Right.
So when you come through postmenopause and obviously your estrogen is baseline lower and quite stable. Yep, more stable, but obviously a lot lower. Does that mean that the hippocampus is starting to reboot in a way, or how would you explain that?
let's see, let's see if I can come up with an analogy off the top of my head. So it's not so much rebooting because it's still working the whole time, but it would be like, okay, so you've probably had the experience where, you're used to one temperature this time of year, and if you happen to travel to another part of the world, the first couple of
Yeah.
days it's like, oh, it's too hot, or oh, it's so cold, right? Whatever it might be. And then after a couple of days you're like, oh, I'm kind of used to, we don't need to turn up the air conditioning quite as high, or I don't need to wear as many layers, right? So basically your body is adjusting. The experience of perimenopause is it can be years, right, before your body can
Yeah.
can fully adjust, but once you're like, okay, now this is the new temperature, now this is the new hormonal level, then basically the hippocampus doesn't have to be as reactive. It's not as dependent on estrogen as it used to be. It can compensate. And as a result, and other brain areas too, you have estrogen receptors all over your brain. And so those other systems can adjust. And it's as a result, the other systems, you also get some systems that can compensate. So for instance, if your hippocampus isn't functioning quite as well, your prefrontal cortex can help out a bit more. However, that's not going to happen if you're chronically stressed, which also tends to
Right. Yeah.
happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that also tends to happen at midlife where we're taking care of aging parents. So, we've both given examples of our in-laws that we're worried about, if not caring for. And so if your stress levels are high, other brain areas are going to have a harder time stepping up and helping. So that can be another thing to do is, so you want to decrease your chronic stress levels to the extent that you can control that. You want to improve your sleep. That'll help glymphatic clearance, reduce brain fog.
Yeah, well, actually, you've just read my mind because I actually want to talk about the impact of stress
Sure, yeah.
and multitasking. So you've already touched on it and how, high levels of stress will have a negative impact on your brain function or brain health.
Yes.
Can you unpack that a little bit more for us?
Sure. Would you mind? Could we do a quick demonstration? I would love to do,
Yeah,
and
cool.
then I'll explain, but I'd love to do a quick demonstration of something that can immediately reduce your stress levels. So it's going to be a breathing demonstration. It'll take about 40 seconds. So, and people can join in. You can do it at home. You can do this as you're listening in your car. You're not going to have to shut your eyes. So you can do
Love
it
it.
safely while you're driving. Okay, because I listen to podcasts a lot while I'm driving, so I like that.
Same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, me too. All right, so I'm going to describe it first, Tracy, and then we'll do it. So
Yeah.
in a moment, I'm going to ask you to exhale all of your air. Then I'm going to ask you to inhale for a count of 5, and I'll count it out loud. I'm going to ask you to hold for a count of 2, and then I'll have you exhale for a count of 7. Now, most people have the hardest time with the inhale for a count of 5. It's going to be a long inhale. Let's say 3, you're like, Therese, I can't inhale anymore. Just start holding early. You can start holding your breath early. That won't hurt. The most important part is that long exhale. You want to have as long. And so sometimes people find it helpful to purse their lips like they're breathing out through a straw or blowing on a piece of pizza. So like that. Okay. So,
Got it.
and
Ready.
we'll do 2 cycles. So exhale all of your air. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 2. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 2. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so how do you feel?
Yeah, that works for me. And actually, because I do that.
You do that. This isn't news
Yeah.
to you. Oh, great.
Yeah, no,
Good.
but I wanted to share. I've been sharing it with some clients that I do some
Oh,
work with,
good.
and I have the same system, but I call it box breathing.
Box breathing, right?
So yeah, so it's very similar. So you're inhaling for a certain amount of time, holding,
Holding,
exhaling,
right.
holding. Yeah, so like a
Yes.
box. But
A bike
so
practice.
I really love that, and I feel like there has been moments of high stress where I've had to activate that type of breathing just
Yes.
to, allow my mind to switch off for a second while everything's going ping, 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 ping. And then, yeah, it really, really helps.
It
So
does.
do you want to tell me about the science of
Sure.
what we're actually doing, how that affects our body and our brains?
Yes. So one difference between the kind of breathing we just did and box breathing. Usually box breathing, it's a same number of seconds for inhale as exhale,
Yeah,
although maybe you do it slightly differently, but usually it's the same number of
it's the
inhale,
same. Yeah.
right? Same. And what we just did was a longer exhale, and there are many benefits to box breathing, which you could no doubt talk about. But with that long exhale, we're really doing 2 things. So when you have a long exhale, there's basically a signal directly from your heart to your brain that if you're doing a long, slow exhale, everything's okay. And we can get into like what's happening with the heart chamber and the lungs. But basically, that long, slow exhale sends a signal to your heart. Your heart starts beating more slowly when you do a long exhale. And if your heart's beating slowly, it sends a signal to your brain like, hey, everything's okay. Because if I'm calm, things must be okay.
Yeah, that's nice.
You're tricking your brain into thinking, because your body's getting a relaxation signal, that your brain should get a relaxation signal. So that's one mechanism. The other is that really long, slow exhale, especially when you blow out through your mouth. When you do that pursed lips like you're blowing on a piece of pizza, that activates the vagus nerve, which runs down the back of your throat. And by stimulating the vagus nerve in that way, you also send a relaxation response. So and because the vagus nerve travels up from your heart and your lungs up to your brain, and it also runs down, but by signaling it on the way up, you're sending your brain again a second signal that everything's okay, we can relax. So you've got two systems sending a relaxation signal to your brain, and people feel calmer. Now, do you see an immediate drop in cortisol levels? No, but you will see an improvement in heart rate variability, feeling calmer, more relaxed. So it's a really nice way, and I've used this in stressful situations, and people don't even know I'm doing it, right? Because you can be in a stressful conversation and do it. You tune out.
You can.
You can. Yeah, you tune out for just a couple of seconds, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I can handle this. So it's a really nice way to get a little distance and tell your brain everything's okay.
That's incredible. Like such a well-researched and proven tool, which takes 20 seconds to decrease your stress, right? So I really highly recommend anybody try that. I mean, I've been using that kind of tool for a number of years, especially during midlife, with all the things that go on.
All the things.
And it definitely helps. And of course, it leads nicely into the power of meditation, which actually does drop your cortisol levels if you can do about 10 minutes. So there's a nice little blood test that can be done that shows that your cortisol levels are coming down by practicing meditation quite regularly. So it's a nice start to teach your body something so simple and activate the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system, and it really, really helps.
And so is there a particular kind of meditation that you like to advocate, or?
Well, I personally need guided meditations.
Me too. Yep.
So my brain, I'm a high creative brain, so I find it very difficult to switch down any thoughts. So I need distraction.
Yes.
So I use guided meditations to distract my mind, but also take me through the process of the breathing techniques. And I really enjoy that. Like, I think what's getting better and better over time is that I am almost craving the moment that I get to sit down, put my headphones on and tap into that meditation, because the instant feeling of calm, and also that knowing that I've just done something for myself. It's only 10 minutes, that feeling like you've done a little bit of self-help for your, taking care of yourself, put yourself first.
Yes.
Only 10 minutes, drops your cortisol, gives clarity of mind, makes you a nicer person, like just ticking all the boxes. So, I mean, it's taken me a really long time to really advocate for meditation, but I definitely needed the science first. There it is.
Can I add one more reason related to aging that you want to do meditation? And this for me was the clincher as to now I have a regular meditation practice. I meditate about 4 or 5 days a week, just for 10 minutes, like you said, right?
Yeah, same.
But the finding that for me was just mind-blowing is, how we talked earlier about how you lose about 5% of your prefrontal cortex and your hippocampus every decade after age 40? Mindfulness meditation, 10 minutes a day, gives it back to you. Isn't that amazing?
I didn't know that, and I'm so excited.
Yep. It increases connectivity in your prefrontal cortex. It doesn't grow new neurons, but it will grow new branches, the analogy of the tree branches. Yeah. And in the hippocampus, it will actually grow new neurons. So you increase the thickness of your prefrontal cortex because you're adding new branches. And in your hippocampus, you actually get new neurons being added. And you can do this in your 60s, your 70s. It's not like you lose the ability. Anyway, it's one of the few brain areas we found that you can actually add new neurons, and meditation is one of them. Isn't that amazing?
That's so amazing. And that is an incredible segue to some of the other great tools and recommendations that you have around brain health and supporting your brain. So do you want to lay it out for us?
Sure.
I'm already excited. I mean, I've already obviously on the right track. I'm giving myself a little pat on the back
there
here.
You go. Good job.
But I absolutely love that because it is my greatest fear. I've said this multiple times to my husband. This is just TMI sharing right now, but
Sure.
I said, look, I'm fine with any physical fallout that comes with aging, although I'm doing my very best to not let that happen, right?
Sure, right, of course.
Strength training, nutrition,
Yep.
stress reduction, doing all the things.
Good.
A lot of which I've learned through interviewing amazing people like yourself. I've learned these things, right? But my greatest fear in aging is actually losing cognition. And I said, I give you permission to take me out. If I get to the point where I can't remember your name, we're done. I'm out because that's my biggest fear of aging. That's
too.
why this conversation for me was actually really personal. Because it is something that I hold, like, I just don't want to have that happen to me. I value learning and understanding and just learning from the world around me, and being creative. Like, these things are so deeply important to me that to not have that full function brain is absolutely horrific.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us, what do we need to do?
Okay, so I talk about a lot of them in Sharp in terms of different strategies, but I'll review a couple of the key ones here. So we've touched upon mindfulness meditation. It's not that other kinds of meditation aren't good, but mindfulness meditation has been really rigorously studied, and I love apps. Can I mention a free app that's out there that I like?
Yeah.
Healthy Minds. It's called Healthy Minds. You can find it.
Nice.
It's a really nice one. It's free, and you can do active meditations, which is nice. So you can take a morning walk and do a meditation. That's an option with Healthy Minds. So mindfulness meditation is number one. Number two, things that are good for your heart tend to be good for your brain. So aerobic exercise, huge. That also will add new neurons to your hippocampus, and it releases something called brain-derived neurotropic factor, and which is like fertilizer for your brain. It's what helps sprout those new connections. Aerobic exercise, and we can even get really specific. Basically, you want to do, the research is clear on this, that we can have a protocol. You want about 40 minutes of aerobic exercise at least twice a week. So that could be a spin class. That can be you go
I teach spin classes.
You teach spin classes. There you go.
Yeah. Twice a week.
Right. Twice a week. You've got it. You've check.
Yeah.
Good job.
Check. Yeah.
Check. And that's going to be very brain or neuroprotective, as we like to say in neuroscience circles. So aerobic exercise, mindfulness meditation. Another one, and this, I'm going to give you two ways to approach this. Green tea. I don't know if you do.
What do you think I'm drinking? I've been drinking it throughout our podcast. This is green tea. I can't really show you.
I can't really tell.
Finished.
No.
Every day at about 10 or 11 in the morning.
Perfect.
I have a green tea.
Yep. So that's protective of white matter. So we talked about white matter starting to degrade as we age. Green tea seems to people who drink a lot of green tea. So if you don't drink green tea, finding at least one green tea that you can drink once a day, important. The most protective effects come at 3 cups of green tea a day. So that's changed my behavior. I now try to, I don't do it every day, but most days I try to reach the 3 cups of green tea. So look for green tea that you can find palatable. A lot of, add some honey. It's okay to add some sweetener if you need to.
I'm fine with it.
You're fine with it? Oh, good.
It. Yeah.
Good.
I think it's like years in Asia and lots of people drink it. It's like normal,
Exactly. That would do it. Yep. All your time in Asia. Because you were there, 20 years, right? Yeah. In Kuala Lumpur. Yeah.
Yep. But it's there's a big Japanese community and I don't know. I've always liked green tea.
Good. Yeah. For some people, they find it too grassy. But anyway, that's a third one to be very helpful to your brain and reduce the chances of dementia and something called white matter lesions, which we don't need to go into, but that's also impairs cognition as we get older. Other good things, stay social. So dementia increases. Some studies I've seen, your risk of dementia goes up by about 60% if you're isolated. And right. Very sad.
Yeah.
And so as a result, it's really interesting. So one of the findings that's been found in so many different countries with so many different cultural traditions, is that one of the best forms of exercise you can do to preserve your cognition as you grow older is dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's got, right, you've got the physical component, right? You're moving, the aerobic part. You've got to memorize the steps. There's a mental part, and then there's a social part, right? You're bumping into people. You have a partner that you're dancing with or not dancing with. Anyway, so dance. When people ask me what I want to do when I retire, I say I want to take a dance class.
I love that. Yeah.
So social, but dance is a nice one that kind of a trifecta that combines many different things. And
So you think we should go back to clubbing? Because I only just finished.
you just finished. I like it.
Like probably my last big experience clubbing was 5 years ago in Ibiza, celebrating my friend's 50th, and we were dancing.
Oh, good for you.
So
yeah.
I know a lot of people will go, what the heck does she think she's doing? But I'm like, no, there's something in this dance thing.
Well, there really is.
It's just, it makes me feel so happy, the endorphin rush, just the combination of the music, the people around you, the joy. Yeah. I mean, and your body moving in time to the music,
moving,
right?
Exactly, that rhythm. Oh, it's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would recommend in terms of protecting your brain and your mind, because I'm with you, my biggest fear is also that I'll lose my cognitive abilities, is figure out what causes inflammation for you. So, there are common culprits. Sugar can cause inflammation. Having a diet with a lot of processed meats in the United States, that would be a lot of bacon and sausage. I don't know what it would mean in your part of the world. But if, for instance, I'm becoming an advocate of getting tested for celiacs, because it's estimated that roughly 1% of the population, at least in the United States, has celiacs. Way higher than I would have guessed. 1 in 100, right?
That's high.
It's high. It's much higher. And fewer than half those people know that they have it. But that causes tremendous inflammation. Figuring out what causes inflammation for you, because inflammation is a big negative factor in dementia. That they believe that's one of the things that makes it worse. So figuring out what causes inflammation for you, and then, it's hard, but making some dietary changes, that'll be really protective.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for those. I think the one that I probably need to personally look into, and talking with a lot of my girlfriends around this, is just the sugar thing, right? It's actually really, really incredibly difficult to be mindful of, how much sugar is actually in our diets. I'm really aware of it. And I notice when my stress levels go up that my craving for sugar goes up. Like I can see the alignment, and I even am having a little conversation with myself. Do you really need this now? Do you know it's going to cause inflammation? Do you?
Yes. And you're like,
and
you're like, but it'll make me feel better, and I need to feel better.
Yeah, it actually just doesn't. And I think I'm definitely learning. No, I mean, the taste is good for sure, but like the fallout physically and mentally, and that feeling of exhaustion the next day as your body's just trying to process it. Body does not like that. It's like, okay, I'm learning the hard way, but I guess it's the last bastion of joy to get rid. No, there's lots of other good things to look forward to, which is a long and healthy life, and lots of dance moves to practice. So, hey, Therese, I have learnt an incredible amount from you. I think what I was doing before I spoke to you was just scratching the surface around a healthy brain and aging. And I actually feel like you have nailed so many of my questions and answered so many of my questions for me. And I'm deeply passionate about this topic. I'm going to do a lot more research. And how can we find you? I actually feel like you've written something. So can you share about that?
I have, yeah. So I've written a book called Sharp, 14 Simple Ways to Improve Your Life with Brain Science. And you can either get the United States edition or the UK edition, depending on, it's available on online retailers. So you should be able to find it on Amazon or whatever platform you like. And you can find me on my website, ThereseHuston.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter, and I'd love to be in touch.
Hey, that's fantastic. I'll put those tools and resources in our show notes, so it'll be easy for anyone to find you. Thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing, and I'm feeling quite hopeful.
Thank you. And you're already doing so many things, and I hope your husband is on board and he wants to do these things too. And I feel you're doing a huge service to the world. So we all thank you.
Thank you.